A Capitol trilogy. We're preparing you for a third special session in Austin.
They don't like the development, and so we're getting a little pushback from it.
And a fast-growing development outside Houston just made it on the special session agenda. Plus, why President Biden gave the green light to new border wall sections in South Texas, and how state leaders want to go further.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. With the impeachment trial and acquittal of Attorney General Ken Paxton now finished, it is deja vu all over again. Tomorrow, lawmakers return to the state capitol in Austin at 1 o'clock to work for another special session. With two already in the books, will this one mirror the quick exit by the House on the first special session on property taxes, or the second, where something finally got passed? Governor Greg Abbott's agenda sets out what he wants them to cover. At the top of the call, what he lists as education freedom. He added that he specifically wants legislation to allow for education savings accounts for all Texas school children. There's also an agenda item for border security. In addition to new penalties he wants enacted into law for those who illegally enter the U.S., he wants licensed peace officers to have the power to remove from Texas any migrants here illegally. That's currently only a federal power. He also wants added funding for border barriers. The governor added he wants to address public safety, specifically with Colony Ridge. This is something we'll explain more in a bit, but it is a development in Liberty County, northeast of Houston. There are allegations it markets land to undocumented immigrants and has crime issues. The governor also wants what he labeled as ending COVID restrictions. Specifically, he wants a bill prohibiting vaccine mandates by private employers. The removal of Congressman Kevin McCarthy from U.S. Speaker of the House this past week definitely has the ears of Texans. Candidates to be the next speaker met with the Texas GOP delegation in Washington to vie for support. And now some Texas state Republicans want to mount the same challenge against Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan. Ryan Chandler reports on the fight ahead for Texas Republicans.
He's been an absolute disgrace as Speaker, so we're going to have to remove him, and they should.
The Texas GOP turning on a top leader as some Republicans go after the gavel.
We have wide open borders, we have no medical freedom, and we don't have education freedom. It should never have gotten here, and we need somebody in the Speaker's chair who will pass the conservative priorities.
Brian Harrison is calling for Phelan's resignation.
Representative, if not Speaker Phelan, who would you support for Speaker?
Look, there are a number of people in the Texas House that are conservative, but here's what matters the most to me. Texas voters elected Republican leadership, and they deserve bold, conservative Republican leadership who will adhere to the principles of limited government, who will fight for individual freedom, and who will not team up with the Democrats.
Infighting. That's a symptom of the same intra-party feud that fueled McCarthy's removal.
It's a national problem, but it's translated itself to Texas, obviously. Republicans are having an internal argument between mainstream Republicans and what can only be characterized as populist Republicans.
But Texas is not D.C., as Speaker Phelan warned members in January, fresh off a decisive victory.
Words of caution. Please do not confuse this body with the one in Washington, D.C.
And in Austin, it seems the votes are still on his side.
He is their main fundraiser, and taking him out of the chair would be as foolish as it was taking McCarthy out of the chair, because you have to have a strong speaker to go out and raise the money to defend your incumbents.
Let's bring in Capitol correspondent Ryan Chandler now. Ryan, I know you just explained why it doesn't seem like this would happen, but is it even procedurally possible to do this in a special session?
It is possible, Josh, if not highly improbable that anything would come of it. Remember, we usually elect the speaker at the beginning of regular sessions every other year in Texas. We haven't seen a move like this try to come up during a special session, now the third special session of the year. But what that would look like is a member would bring a motion to vacate, very similar to what we saw this week in Washington, D.C. And if that got a majority of members, then it would vacate the chair. They would elect a new speaker. I don't see that happening. Dade Phelan still has wide support in the House. Remember, he was elected 145-3 on a broad overwhelmingly bipartisan vote just back in January for his second term as Speaker.
Let's get into some of the topics for the session. We do know what a bill on those education savings accounts would look like, but we know public school districts have called for more funding. That's not on the call. Last weekend, Texas school superintendents banded together showing they will oppose any plan that means less money for public schools. The Texas Association of School Boards and School Administrators held its annual convention in Dallas. This time, school board members from districts of all sizes and political leanings addressed the media, saying plans to let parents use state money to pay for private school will make a bad situation worse.
Texas ranks 43rd in per pupil funding nationally. With all of its resources, Texas still ranks near the bottom in funding for public education.
We're not interested in compromising for vouchers to gain school funding. This is a hill that we're willing to die on. We believe so strongly in the public schools that we are not willing to compromise to the governor's agenda.
One of the potentially more obscure items on the special session agenda has to do with a residential neighborhood coming under scrutiny. Colony Ridge, a residential development 30 miles north of downtown Houston, has come under fire by numerous conservative media outlets. The claim is it is a haven for illegal immigrants. Trey Harris, one of the developers, disputes these portrayals. He actually invited lawmakers to see the situation for themselves.
They're not real happy about all the development that's coming in. They had a little, what they felt was a little quiet community that of about 600 people, and now we've moved 40,000 people in on top of them, and so they don't like the development.
The local sheriff's office says it needs more officers to patrol the region, but described the crime rates as not any worse than other parts of Texas. The development broke ground 20 years ago. Harris notes that he also has donated more than $1 million to Governor Abbott's campaigns.
I'll answer one question on the border wall. The border wall, the money was appropriated for the border wall. I tried to get them to reappropriate, to redirect that money. They didn't, they wouldn't. And in the meantime, there's nothing under the law other than they have to use the money for what it was appropriated. I can't stop that.
Do you believe the border wall works?
No.
Just this past week, the Biden administration announced it will waive 26 federal laws in Starr County in South Texas to allow construction of the border wall to resume. The Department of Homeland Security posted the announcement, including waiving such federal laws such as the Clean Air Act, the Safe Water Drinking Act, and Endangered Species Act. The money for construction comes from federal funds appropriated in 2019 during the Trump administration. The new construction could add up to 20 miles of the existing border wall. But as with a special session agenda, Governor Greg Abbott continues to assert Texas has a right to pass border policy without the federal government. The Justice Department is still suing over practices such as the buoys placed by the state in the Rio Grande near Eagle Pass and razor wire added to the banks of the river. Members of Customs and Border Protection have cut the wire in places to allow migrants in for processing of asylum claims.
When they are abandoning the rule of law, we cannot cooperate with them when we will not be an accomplice to that. Instead, we have to alter our strategies so that we, the state of Texas, are using every tool that we can to enforce the rule of law in Texas.
Both state Democrats and Republicans want the state to do more. Eagle Pass native Eddie Morales is advocating for a new work program. Migrants who pay a $2,000 processing fee get to stay and get jobs. He says it could generate $1 billion a year for the state.
We need to make sure that we address the issue itself, and that's getting these folks and sending a clear message to Latin America that if they come into Texas, they will be asked to pay into the system, not take from the system.
But it is not just Eagle Pass. Our colleagues at BorderReport.com noticed migrant traffic picking up in Brownsville in South Texas. Agents told Border Report nearly 4,000 who crossed illegally were apprehended in the sector just last weekend. In fact, the number of people stopped at the U.S.-Mexico border in some form or fashion is nearing record levels. The September numbers are still being calculated, but August saw more than 232,000 people logged by border agents. Last time it was this high was back in December. Anyone deemed inadmissible by the government now deals with a Title VIII expulsion. That means anyone who crossed illegally could be banned for at least 5 years from re-entering the U.S.
Invoice did not exist until 7 p.m. on the 1st, after the whistle blow, after notice that people were looking into it.
If that's so evident, why don't you put that in evidence?
They never made it to senators, but they will see the light of day. We're looking at newly released documents to the public after never making it to Attorney General Ken Paxton's impeachment trial.